He said, I've said too much already. And all he said was, will you marry me? Well, may I say, we have death and life are in the power of the tongue, and whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord. And I want to say that I've always thanked the Lord for mine. It's wonderful to have a wonderful wife, and one that can put up with you, by the way. Now, in verse 24, the last verse, a man that hath friends must show himself friendly. That's wonderful, isn't it? You want to have friends? Well, show yourself friendly. And there is a friend that sticketh closer than a brother. He says, you are my friends if you do whatsoever I command you. Now, wait just a minute. Don't you run around and start singing. Now, Jesus is a friend of mine. The minute I hear somebody singing that, I say, wait a minute, wait a minute. Are you obeying him? He said, you're my friends if you do whatsoever I command you. Now, if you're not obeying him, I take it that you're not his friend. He loved us enough to die for us. And he says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Lo, I'm with you always. Now, here in chapter 19, we have it like this. It says, better is the poor that walketh in his integrity than he that is perverse in his lips and is a fool. Believe me, the Lord's forbidden us to call any man a fool, but he has really been using that word, because apparently there are quite a few of them around in the human family. Verse 2, also that the soul be without knowledge. It's not good. And he that hasteth with his feet sinneth. The foolishness of man perverteth his way, and his heart fretteth against the Lord. Now, what he's doing here is what he's been doing actually all along in this parallelism by contrast. And here we have a contrast actually between those that are God's children and those that are not. And one is the path of truth, and the other is the path of self-will, and that of the fool, if you please, and also of ignorance. Now, we've heard the old proverb today, where ignorance is bliss, 'tis folly to be wise. Well, that is a false proverb. It's not true. I used to have several officers that seemed to pride themselves in the fact that, well, they would always speak out and say, well, that is theological, or that's biblical, and I don't know much about that. Well, I always felt like saying, and I had to bite my lip to keep from saying it, well, why in the world don't you know it? You ought to. A mature man, an officer in the church, and you're that devoid of spiritual understanding. And so here we have this distinction that is made. Here is a nice little saying that the professor sent me. No man is uneducated who knows the Bible, and no one is truly educated who is ignorant of its teaching. Now, that used to be true, but today they're far from it. I probably should say it like this. Today, this is not accepted as truth. There was a day when it is. I still consider this true. I don't think a man can be truly educated who is ignorant of the Bible. And certainly Christians today ought not to be ignorant of the Bible. The thing that should characterize the child of God, therefore, is one who knows the Word of God. Now, we have here in verse 4, wealth maketh many friends, but the poor is separated from his neighbor. Now, the wealthy folk, materially, will always have a house full of guests. As long as the ice box is filled and the bar has plenty of bottles on it that are filled, and also there's plenty of music and entertainment and luxury that's around them, they'll have plenty of guests. But the interesting thing is, God says here that the poor man is the one that the child of God should seek out. You remember that James has a great deal to say about that. And I'm afraid that today we are putting a wrong emphasis. I hear so many people say, well, you know, we have a millionaire in our church. And how many preachers have told me that? I have a millionaire in my church. Well, you might be better off without him, by the way. And you remember James, in a very practical way. Now he says, here comes a man into your assembly, he has a gold ring and goodly apparel. There coming also a poor man in vile raiment. And ye have respect to him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, sit thou here in a good place. Say to the poor, stand thou there, or sit here under my footstool. And may I say to you that I'm afraid today the poor man has his problems. And we sometimes wonder why there are a lot of folk that don't go to church. You can't get them into church. A couple were telling me they're a poor couple and not able to buy the latest, and what they have looks pretty worn. I've seen them so-called dressed up. They're telling about going to a church that has a reputation of being a very conservative, evangelical church. And you know what happened. They have been snubbed. It's been terrible what happened to them. May I say to you, friends, today, human nature hasn't changed down through the centuries, and I'm afraid that there's a whole lot of old nature that is showing. God lays it on the line here, doesn't he? He says the poor is separated from his neighbor even. They find out you're a poor boy, they don't want you around. Now, verse 5, a false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaketh lies shall not escape. Now, if you drop down to verse 9 here, you'll find that you have here a statement. Well, it seems to be a repetition. It says, a false witness shall not be unpunished. Well, that's exactly like verse 5 starts out. And he that speaketh lies shall perish. What he's saying here is this, that a false witness, he's not going to escape. He'll be found out. He'll be called to account for what he said. And not only that, he's going to perish. God will see to that. Take this matter of Naboth. You remember Naboth? The false witnesses rose up against him, and he lost his vineyard. Ahab took it and thought he got by with it. He didn't get by with it. Elijah met him and said, just the same way that you took Naboth, and right where his blood was shed, your blood's going to be shed. In fact, the dogs will lick it up there. And you know, Ahab says, well, that's one place I'll stay away from. I won't be caught there because the dogs are not going to lick my blood. Well, what happened was this, that this man went into battle, and it turned against him, and he had put Jehoshaphat out in front as the king, and he thought he had escaped. And he was leaving the battle, and some trigger-happy soldier on the other side had one arrow left in his quiver and put it in the bow and pulled the bow, and it was a bow at a venture. That is, he didn't know what he was shooting at. But that arrow had Ahab's name on it. And that arrow started out, it just went zing, and when it did, it says, Ahab, where are you? I'm looking for you. And it found him. And he bled like a stuck pig, and he said to his servant, take me out of the battle, and he was taken out. And you know where they took him? To Naboth's vineyard. He could hide there, you know. And he died. His blood ran all down over the chariot, and they washed out the chariot. The dogs came and just licked up the blood. You say that's crude and frightful. You bet it is. But my friend, lying, false witness, gossip, in God's sight is really crude, and God hates it. He says that he does. What a picture that you have here in these Proverbs, by the way.